In the next 20 minutes or so, I'll walk you through what we are experiencing as really the largest customers are going to SAP S/4HANA. We are in the market for 4 years now. We just shipped the 5th release a week back, and customers have thought around how will they go to S4 every now and then. Now, obviously, the high-end systems, just like it was in the ERP times, they have certain requirements around downtime management, around scalability, around throughputs and so on, that are beyond the traditional. And so what we then have seen is that since the beginning, the larger and more complex systems are, the more they try to find references that relate to what they have experienced. Now, finally, I must say we really have customers in the top segment of our installed base in terms of complexity of systems, in terms of volumes in the systems that now can be referenced. What I'm going to do in the next couple of minutes is walk you through 3 distinct examples that showcase how to best approach that if you are a high-end system, and then also reflect on where we are on a more general terms. But one thing that I want still to add, right, all the other systems, while they are smaller, it's sometimes the one ERP of one company. So in terms of business criticality, they are just equal, right? It's about the complexities that you have experienced in high-end system traditionally, and guess what? Going to a new architecture, you will have to work through those again as well. And now let's really dive into the showcase examples. In this case, it's a multinational CPG customer who is today on an ERP landscape, or was on an ERP landscape, with 5 distinct different ERPs. They started thinking about S4, and while the initial thought was, well, I have 5 ERPs, let's have 5 S4s in the end, actually they realized over time that this is maybe not the right approach. I have an enterprise architecture discussion, which is just as important. Would I not rather consolidate? Would I not want to amalgamate some of the capabilities into S4, which was then yet the other discussion. The customer then approached it in a way to say, yes, I do want to actually consolidate along with it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because consolidation, if you do it on an existing landscape, it's a round of change management for many on equal kind of innovation or equal kind of capabilities. So it's a lot of tedious work for the sake of TCO reduction. But as you go to S4 and do innovation anyway, having consolidation as part of that story is a good thing. And so this is also why they decided to not consolidate up front and then go to S4, but rather go to S4 with one of their systems, define what is the to-be standardized process, and then fold the other systems into that. That has then the large benefit that the change management for the end users is just once, the moment you move into S4. And by that you kind of repurpose the testing and the training that you do to not only achieve the S4 conversion, but then also to do the consolidation. They've started on that, they are live with their first system, and now they are defining the right sequence and all the standardization processes that they want to do in way of folding in more systems. I think a really good example around how large landscapes move in the right sequence, really putting also the landscape evolution into the forefront. Next example is actually a conversion project. And by the way, my examples are all conversion. And that's mainly because I want to reflect that conversion is feasible for also the large customers, right? This was something where a lot of customers were doubting. New installs, guess what? It's similar to a new install in ERP. You do your process designs and so there's not a lot that really totally differentiates, but it's something that all of you have done if you are on ERP already. So here, it's a European company. They actually did a system conversion of a system that came of 16.4 terabyte. So for them, it was important to reach a very minimal downtime. Yeah? So this is why they actually were the first customer who used the downtime optimized conversion process, and we actually co-innovated for a while with him such that he could reach the target. So we were engaging with this customer and evolved the procedures and so on such that in the end he met the target of the downtime. Important statement here, if you find references of downtime, don't take the average values, because customers will stop evolving if they are good enough for what they need to achieve, because driving it down further is always additional work. So it's about what customers want to achieve. So look for the maximums achieved or the minimum times achieved. This is what tells you what can be done, because the others sometimes are just really good enough. To meet the target in the cutover, they actually ran many mock conversions. dress rehearsals, how they call them. And the important thing is they did not just do the technical dress rehearsal, right? Because this gives you just so much. What they did is they pulled it through, and in the end, on that converted system, even ran performance tests. Now that's an important one. You again need to focus on performance. You know, in the old ERP space, each of you used our system differently. You made your database hints and whatever have you to make performance apt to your way of using our system. The same happens here, right? If you have an iron system, you will find the one or the other place in your system where the natural performance will not be sufficient, and then you do similar things like performance optimization very dedicated to you, and this is why this performance test is really important. This customer also did a very decisive end user test, so they pulled in actually all their user over a weekend, and they did mimic a production workload. So it was a very interesting experience. I've not seen anyone else doing it on that profound level. And also what was specific for them is they have a high number of end customers, a couple of million. This is why they pulled forward the CVI, the customer vendor integration, as a pre-project, because that in itself ran quite a while by that number. And this is also why the overall project duration was 23 months, because there were these phases of pre-projects and. Now, but in the end it paid off, right? So all this heavy testing and the mock runs and so on, they actually led to a kind of smooth upgrade weekend, right? It is about, if you have high-end systems, I think this is a lesson learned, really ensure that you prepare well for these kind of conversion projects. And in terms of capabilities, this system is really loaded with significant amount of capabilities spanning really throughout finance and logistics and all kinds of capabilities. So a very broad deployment of our system. Last example, a utilities company. Now this is a system that actually was on ERP 103 terabyte system, right? That's significant. I don't think anyone in this room or many in this room will be near there, because we are here talking about the high-end percentile of our installed base. And basically, as you know, the HANA boxes, they go up to 24 terabytes. So how does the system actually fit in? It does not. So they use scale out. So they are productive on scale out. And so they're really again, it was a co-innovation at that point in time to make scale-out work for this workload. As it's a utilities company, we have seen that obviously their scale-out needs to work slightly different than in the other systems. What you have to avoid in a scale-out is that it's actually cross-node joins would turn down the performance, and to overcome that you need to identify how is the system being used, and you have to identify how the data would be distributed, and that distribution will be, if you wish, very individual. So in that sense, we have the technology to do all of that. However, it has to be applied by each individual customer for the payload he's having. It's also something that you have to keep current, because your payload may change. If you use new capabilities in S4 or add own developments, that may have influence on how data needs to be redistributed. Now, while scale out is possible, we always recommend to do scale up, right? If you have scale out there, it's another part in operations which you have to do. It's more important to say it is feasible, even for the high-end system, through scale out to then also move to S4, and that is proven by this system. They are sitting on 60 terabyte, 3 servers, 25 terabyte database, so really high-end system. What they did for their downtime window is actually they used near zero downtime. And that's what we see in the highest deployments, right? Before the example was a 17 terabyte roundabout. It was a DMO for some. Here we are on that level where near zero downtime is the way to go, because this is how you manage that. In this case, they even did it more complex, because they even went to hack, so that they even changed the data centers along with the conversion. So it was really quite a complex project to overcome all of that. And this is also something around the project timelines, right? You could say before the example 23 months is long, but as there was a CVI project up front and a couple of other things, the actual project is not only like 23 months, it doesn't have to be that long, it can also be shorter, but it depends on what you all want to achieve, like in this case, a hack conversion and Unicode conversion along with it, so adding complexity to just the S4 project. And this is what we're seeing. If you do these kind of heavy lifting things, the more complex and high-end your system is, the more you tend to combine things into these projects, it's very cumbersome to find those time slots when you can even touch the system, right? So you try to take advantage of the downtime window that you negotiate and pull in a couple of things that else would mean multiple projects with multiple downtime windows. And so it's more easy to pull all of those things together. So how large can you get, right? We are on the high end is what I've said, but obviously there are a couple of systems who are even higher, and this is why scale out can be there. And we can have up to 4 of these 24 terabyte servers adjacent, and by that you end up in sizes that reach close to the 100 terabyte. And if you then multiply the average saving, we consider that any system, volume-wise, will find a home in S4. The other discussion we always have is, what is the performance, the throughput, and the scalability in terms of processing that is there. And so a test that we have done is we actually, on commodity hardware, so like only 4 CPUs, we did tests to run a workload of 500K selects and 100K inserts per second with 5K commits. Now, what does that number tell you, right? Most likely nothing, but it is actually more than the biggest ERP we know. So we checked in our installed base, looked for the ERPs with the highest workloads that they have, and actually these are numbers that are surpassing even the most advanced usages of our system. And so even on a very standard commodity hardware of HANA, we can run that workload, which is a good knowledge, right? That means the larger you get, the more you have capacity available, and that gives us also the confidence that we can run each ERP that is today existing on S4 as we go there. And in terms of deploying, well, there's freedom of choice, right? You can use it bare metal in data center, virtualization is supported, and also infrastructure as a service is taking more and more hold. So the hyperscalers play a role as a deployment option. We see that as a more or less trending topic, I must say. So it's really very much something that is becoming more and more existing in our system. Now, I gave you only like the 3 examples, right? So, but this is just, if you wish, the starting point. And as I already described, we have experienced in the last years that the larger the systems were, the more people were kind of really trying to find a reference that they can relate to, that reflects on something that proves that a workload like a specific customer has can run. And over the years, the high end of the systems has grown, and I've just shown you the biggest one with the 60 terabyte and the 26 terabyte. And we believe that with this, we are now really at the point where we have proven that the system scales to wherever it needs. In terms of users, it's actually another level of complexity. The largest number of users in the system that is productive, so this is important, all of what I'm talking about is productive, is 240K users. Right? Which is also massive, right? Because that's a different load in terms of concurrency of users that has to be achieved. And in terms of finance AC.A entries is 10 billion. Also here we have reached very, very large deployments. In terms of productive deployments, I just gave you like 3 examples right now, right? But it's just 3 of many. Initially, when we had adoption starting, it was, as said, more the smaller systems that moved along, the larger were holding back. But by now, I think it's very fair to say that we have an average distribution or a distribution on the S4 size as we do have in the ERP, right? It's always a Gauss curve. We have the outliers to the top, we have the very small ones. And if you look today into the S4 deploy space, we have the similar distribution curve where we have the same average of large systems. So it's kind of caught up to the point where we now can say we really reflect a usual installed base. In terms of migration paths, here we actually see that 2/3 of the projects that are so large are actually system conversions, new installs, sorry, and conversions are 1/3. That is because, like in some places, when you try to consolidate, customers will not have the golden system that they want to consolidate on, right? And then this is a point where customers are starting new. We also have in the large installed base actually quite a couple of net new customers who by definition do new installs. And then in the installed base, you actually opt for either conversion or new install. And also interesting, from the largest ones, 5 out of 7 of the largest used the near zero downtime, as I was mentioning, as a means to really manage the downtime window that they can afford on their deployment. A little bit of rush, like 3 examples. What are the key lessons learned in success criteria, how to really approach these kind of projects? What made those really successful, and I think is a best practice? I think these things are really important for the large ones. It's also good to do it if you're smaller, right? They not necessarily only are relevant for the large ones. However, I think there it's needed. First of all, delete or archive data prior to even starting the migration. We are talking about housekeeping and those things for ages. Everyone agrees it's a good practice, but no one's doing it. Reason being, in the old space, the data is lying around on a disk. It doesn't really reflect anything, so it's just there. People didn't care about it. Now, if you bring it over to S4, you struggle with the downtime anyway. So any data that you bring along you don't need is additional downtime that is waste. Second, it's the HANA box, right? It's now in main memory. The cost of having that unnecessary data is all of a sudden existing. Yeah? Before, lying on a disk, it was not. So it's actually a good advice there. Second, then keep archiving and so on alive, right? Again, once you deploy it, this is kind of avoiding that your system grows and grows and grows and grows. And in all fairness, what is your company 10 years ago compared to your company today? Most likely not as comparable. So having all that data is a little bit of, you don't know whether or not to keep it, but is it really relevant, right? Unless you have to do it for compliance reasons. I know that sometimes you have to keep data, so don't go away and say, I say you should not be compliant. That's not what I'm saying. But not keeping it for the sake of comparing you to the past, right? Most likely irrelevant anyway. And you can store the data outside somewhere to not throw it away if you really need it, but keep that alive to stay up to date. And then stay up to date with what's existing. So on the HANA side, I mean, we have developed things like active and so on. So a lot of the technology is actually there to cater for performance and for the scalability that you need going on further. In terms of project experience, right? Preparation is key. Yeah? I think that is an important one. You have to, I mean, you operate your systems today, the high-end systems, you've gotten used to what it is, but remember yourself what all you had to do to get where you are in terms of running performance, in terms of preparing. Obviously, a meticulous planning of how to make that happen is a very important step. And I think the example of Hilti showed it very nice with the number of dress rehearsals and they really prepared for the cutover day such that this was actually a good experience. Test drive the end-to-end conversion, but again, including then also performance tests, including end-user tests to show the system, to reflect where this is, and to really find problems early on. Right? I cannot stress that long enough or strong enough, because performance, if you don't test that at that point in time, if you only find that out once you're productive, it becomes a very urgent matter. Yeah? And that can have influence on overall operations. It can have influence on processes as they run if the batch runs do not fit into the time slots that you have. Get your team on board. That's also one. We see really regularly that there is not enough business skill or knowledge around the system anymore there. So in many cases, the people who build up the systems are no longer available, so it's kind of run very technically or just maintained. But here again, it's something where in particular as you evolve your custom code and bring it over, you have to do decisions. We see that sometimes up to 80% of custom code is unused, but who makes the call? So it must be people who understand what is there and what can be done. And last but not least, embrace collaboration with SAP experts, right? I pointed towards 2 scenarios where, like in the DMO, we did co-innovation, in the scale-up, we did co-innovation. We do understand that in the high-end system, you need skin in the game, and I think there is super services from Max Attention or from our DBS colleagues that on the one hand side bring you that advice out of other projects. We also have something which we call the RIC, Regional Implementation Group, and Customer Care, where we are actually supporting these kind of high-end projects with a footprint also from development, because we do understand that every now and then there are new ways of using our things. Performance is really one where each of you has different payloads. And then we really want to have skin in the game, helping customers to be successful in their projects. And with that, I'm kind of winding down. Thank you for your attention.